Everyone. Just to begin with, I want to perhaps share 2 or 3 points and just begin from kind of like a personal space of the Enneagram. I found the Enneagram in my early 20s. I was working with an organization called Youth for Christ, and we were quite privileged to have found it through a church that we belonged to at that stage, where we brought it into our organization, and at that stage there were 9 of us. There were 9 of us that all were each of the 9 types. It was amazing. It was a crazy thing, but it was just the most amazing opportunity for us to be able to get to know what different types were like in a very close environment, and also in an environment where we were all really open to learning more about ourselves and being open to self-awareness. But having said that, even though we thought that we were all 9 types, Kippy here thought that she was a 4 for about 10 years of my life. Because I had done the test, and the reason I bring this up is because I've heard so many people talk about the fact that they've done this test, and like Lee was saying this evening, she was first a 1, and then she was a 4, and then she was a 2, and everyone keeps doing the test. These online tests, and I have said this before, these online tests aren't 100% accurate. They probably are 45 to 50% accurate. And so I don't want you to worry that even after tonight, you still might be questioning, what is my type? Because you can mistype yourself. So when I did the test, there were no online tests. We had to literally write down, I think it was like 180 questions, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, and then we had to count up all the yeses and all of the no's. And the reason that I actually chose to be a 4 because I had come out as an equal number on at least 5 of them, which makes complete sense for a 9, because 9s don't know themselves and they see themselves in other people. Actually, they merge with other types very easily. So I just kind of looked at all of the types and I thought 4s look the best. They are so cool, aren't they, Dale? And they really are, because they're unique, because they're individual, because of all of that. I just thought, and also they're caring, they're nurturing, they're very good at that stage. As I said, I was working in a youth organization, and I spent my life counseling young teenage girls. That's really what I did. And so it made perfect sense that I was getting into this deep, dark tragedy of teenage girls' lives, and a 4 was the perfect thing for me to be. But it was only when I was in my early 30s, around 34, 35, when I started going through my divorce last year. When I started going through my divorce, that I went back to the Enneagram, and that's when I suddenly went, I'll never forget the day. I actually started studying an online Enneagram course through JFK University. So now the first introduction was the early 20s, now I was like 30 something, and I went back to this course, and I remember sitting in my study, and the reason I'd gone back to it was because I was in this crisis of my life. I was needing to find direction. I was needing to kind of find answers as to why my marriage was falling apart. And I remember sitting in the study and just going, oh my gosh, this is why I'm in this space, because I've been a 9, because I've merged with my ex-husband, because I've become more of him than what I've ever known about myself. The best thing about my life was that I was a mum, and I knew I was good at that, but I actually didn't know what else I was good at. And he was a very big personality. He is an amazing big personality, and my girls will tell you that. So it was the perfect place for me to hide. It was the perfect place for me to become smaller and smaller as he became bigger and bigger. So discovering that when I was going through my divorce was massive for me. It was huge. And the reason I'm telling you that part of the story is that I know that a lot of people have been questioning the Enneagram right now, and I know that some people are questioning it from a point of view of, it's so easy to rely on this tool more than what we rely on God in our lives. And I think that in a way, I went through that. I think that possibly during that time, because I was going through this crisis, because I was needing answers, I think I had about 4 or 5 Enneagram books that I would just keep opening up and thinking, okay, maybe this will give me an idea as to what to do next, or why it is, because I never wanted to be the kind of ex-wife that just blamed everything on her ex-husband. I wanted to know what I did wrong, where I had to come to the party in this divorce. And so I did. I'd wake up in the morning, Enneagram book, okay, he's doing this, maybe it's because he's that number and I'm this type, and. And I think it took a little while for me to realize that, yes, this is helpful. Yes, this is shining so much light onto who I am and what my triggers are, what I've been doing in this relationship to contribute to the breakdown of it. But at the same time, I needed God in my world to bring healing. And I need the Holy Spirit. I needed to meet with the Holy Spirit to actually bring wholeness again. So it wasn't the Enneagram that brought that wholeness to my life. Yes, it was a helpful tool. And yes, to this day, it is still an incredibly helpful tool. But you can't just do the Enneagram without God in your life. And so that's my encouragement. And I really think that, I went through a stage where it was always, God, take this away from me. So the more you learn about yourself, the more you realize that you have a need to be perfect and that you're angry with the world because the world isn't perfect. The more you realize that all you want is fun and you want to go out there and you want to fill your life with the next best thing instead of being still and present. The more you feel like you want to be unique, you start realizing there's ugly stuff. And I remember thinking, God, take this away. Like I'm not, help me to just take it away. And I realized that a better way to look at it is to invite God into that place with you. So to be able to say, God, come and be in this with me. I've realized that there's this yucky stuff in my life. But help me, meet me in that place and walk me through it. Because we can get so upset with ourselves when it's the same thing again. This is our type. This is what we know so well. But if God's actually walking us through it and meeting us in that place rather than just taking it away, doesn't that make you more of a whole person at the end of the day? Because you kind of walked it through instead of just, okay, it doesn't exist anymore. Because I promise you, the stuff that you discover about yourself is going to come up over and over and over again. It really is. It's so deep in terms of what your type is. The third thing that I just wanted to mention was I was listening in preparation again. I was listening to an interview with Richard Rohr. And we've been talking a lot about the true self and the false self. And he just said such a beautiful thing. He said, the false self and the true self almost has a negative kind of connotation. It feels a little bit negative. And he said he likes referring to it as the floating self and the anchored self. And I thought, how amazing is that? That is so, like you think about a ship that isn't anchored on the water and is just tossed to and fro and on the waves and in a storm and just not feeling rooted or anchored. And I was busy coaching one of our staff members today, and she was in just such a desperate space, but she's not a Christian. And it was an amazing thought to be, and this came to mind where I thought, this woman is, like she's finding so much value in this thing called the Enneagram and in her type and what we're discovering, but it was like I couldn't anchor it anyway. It was like I couldn't kind of say, yes, this is the stuff, but let's walk together with God and let's try and kind of get you anchored into something. And we're so privileged to be able to do that in this situation, in this community that we live in, because we have something bigger. Yes, we've got the Enneagram, and yes, it's a great tool, but we've got something bigger, and we can really anchor ourselves in that. So from now on, it's not false self, Gary. It's the anchored self and the floating self. So I'm going to start. There's going to be quite a lot of theory tonight. So please, can you stop me at any time and ask questions? Because it's quite a lot to take in, and what you'll see is that I'm going to be almost layering stuff. So we've had fun talking about all of the types, and we'll get more into that next week. We'll talk about specific types. But I just want to kind of start from the very beginning of the Enneagram symbol, what it looks like, what the lines are, because I know there's been a lot of talk, and we moved to this under stress, and then we moved to this under calm, and so there's a lot of layers, and I'm just going to try and build on those layers as best as possible this evening. So please stop me at any time, because it is quite a lot to take in. And I really have been reading up on this stuff since I was early 20s, and I still discover something new every single time I need to prep or present something. I go, oh my gosh, that's what it is. And it suddenly sinks deeper and becomes more real. So just stop me at any time. So first of all, the Enneagram symbol. Starting with the fact that it's a circle. And what does a circle represent? It represents completeness, wholeness, like Bruce's prayer just now in terms of God is all 9 types. That's the completeness, the circle. Then you have your lines. And your lines literally will move from one to the next, to the next, to the next. In the very middle, you have a triangle. And the triangle can be the Trinity. And then you have your lines that move. And like Maria was saying when we first arrived, she says, but we're all different, but we're in community and we can learn from each other. And a lot of people have been saying, I can see myself in so many different types. And when you look at the symbol, you can understand why. And I'm going to be unpacking all of that. But basically, we are all connected, because a 1 goes to a 4, goes to a 2, goes to an 8, goes to a 5, goes to a 7, goes to a 1. And then it kind of keeps going, it keeps flowing, so it's fluid. And that's why you'll hear me referring to the fact tonight that we can be different shades of a type. So just because Gary's a 3, somebody else might be a 3 in this room, but they could look slightly different. They look like you get different shades of blue. There's going to be different shades of what a type is. Because, and I'll carry on in terms of the actual symbol, but you'll see the flow in terms of why we can scoop from other numbers and what it looks like to be able to scoop from those other numbers. So first and foremost, and I'm going to be just moving between those 2 slides now, but you'll see that your 8, 9, and your 1 sit in an action center. So they're very instinctive. It's about body, it's about gut. It's about, when you have that feeling inside of you, but it's an instinctual feeling. It's not a heart feeling. It's an instinctual feeling of I know that I know that I know that I know. They've got a lot to do with doing language. So being able to do things, they'll think a lot about action, and they'll be in touch with action. Not necessarily thinking or feeling, but I just know, my instinct tells me to act in a certain way, and that's what they'll rely on a lot. Then you'll move to your feeling center, which is your 2, 3, and your 4. The green center over there. And that's about heart. So very, very much in their heart space, very much about feeling, emotional language. You'll often hear them kind of going, well, how do you feel about that? Or these are my feelings around a certain situation. And then you'll go to your thinking center, which is your 5, 6, and your 7, and they sit in their heads. So there's a lot about thinking. They'll think things through, and they'll act only after they've thought it through. So we spoke about that analysis paralysis, where they can actually think for too long. So going back to the slide over here, your 8, 9, and your 1, they sit in that gut center. They sit in a place of instinct, like I know instinctually what I need to do. But remember that their main emotion that they deal with is anger. Now the interesting thing with this triad, and we'll work it through all of the triads, your 8, 9, and your 1, although they all sit in an anger triad, that anger is going to show up very differently. Did everybody do the test, by the way? Not everybody, okay. Were there those that did do the test, did anybody come up as an 8? Sherry and Steve as well here. So 8s are, and interject if, just stop me and say, ask questions or say it's not like that. But 8s are in a place, 8s would like to do that. You're welcome to, Sherry. 8s will be, when it comes to their anger, 8s will want to move outward. They're not scared to show their anger. They're not scared to actually show people that they are unhappy. They're not scared to assert themselves. And they literally will move outward. They will move into a situation or move toward. And they're not scared of that anger. And they're not scared to show people that anger. And they don't mind having the same reciprocated. So they actually quite value somebody being angry at them. In fact, they'll rate that person. They'll really feel like, okay, I can have a relationship here because they're giving me back as much as what I'm giving them. So 8s will move outward. 1s, on the other hand, are your perfectionists. And they will take everything inward. So their anger actually moves inward. It becomes something that they do on the inside. It becomes something that they feel like they're not allowed to share with the world out there. So their anger moves in. Then you sit with a 9, which is at the top of the Enneagram. And 9s are in a conflicted space of anger. They're unsure. They kind of might be feeling angry, might not be feeling angry, could be allowed to feel angry. 3 days later, only realized, oh gosh, I was angry, now it's a bit too late to react, kind of angry. So you can see they're in that confused space. And it's the weird thing, because they actually sit in the top of that anger and in the middle of that anger triad. And they sit at the top of an action triad, remember? So they're action-oriented. But because of that, even though they should be action-oriented, they don't show the action because they actually are confused. They don't know whether they can or can't, or whether it's going to be something that they're almost allowed to do, because they're unsure of the feeling that they've got. They're unsure of what's sitting there. Charmaine's nodding. So again, 8 outward, 1 inward with their anger, and 9's conflicted, confused, a little bit unsure as to how they should be or how they should act. Moving again to your feeling centers, you've got your 2's who are going to be very outward. Remember, they're the considerate helpers, so they like to serve. And their emotion that they're dealing with constantly is shame. Shame and image. So what the 2's are going to do is they're going to be outward. They are going to show themselves outwardly. Because if they don't love everybody, they're not going to get the love in return. So their image that they're going to show to the world is one of absolute love and servanthood and just showing their love, because actually at the end of the day they're wanting to receive the love and they feel like they need to love to be loved. So they're very outward in how they share their love. They're very outward in how they project that image of helping. Your 4, on the other hand, they're very internal when it comes to their image. So they'll actually withdraw from a crowd. They'll actually they'll pull away. Like I said to you when I spoke to you weeks ago, when you look at the 4 at coffee, they'll often be on the outskirts because they'll be pulling people towards them. They want people to come move around them. And they're very good at that. You're kind of drawn to that in a way. And so they'll become very internal in how they process that shame and how they actually show that image to the world. Because remember, they want to be unique, they want to be individual, and they want to stand out. And their way of standing out is actually withdrawing. And then you get your 3's who sit again in the middle of your feeling triad, the middle of your heart triad. And again, you would think that 3's would be the most in touch with their heart. But they're also in this conflicted place. They're also in this confused place of actually knowing they should feel, but because they're so goal-oriented, because the 3, remember, is the need to succeed, they're the achievers, they're also about image, but they want to portray an image of success, and actually, emotions can just be a waste of time. Because they're so goal-oriented, they so need to achieve what they've set out to do, that they don't allow themselves the time to be in touch with their feelings. So even though they're sitting in the middle of that feeling triad, and again, these 3 points are actually called the anchor points, because they sit in the middle, but they're conflicted in what they should be doing, or how they should be feeling, or what they should be thinking. So again, your 3 is conflicted, confused. 2, outward in terms of their image. 4's inward in terms of their image. And then you get your 3's who are conflicted. They want to get there, don't want to deal with the feelings that are involved in getting there. Moving on to your thinking center, your head space. Again, 5's, your quiet specialists. They are the ones on the Enneagram who think, but they think internally, because to them, remember, knowledge is power. So the more they can take in, the safer they feel. They sit in that space of fear, the fear triad. The head types are all fear related. So to be able to deal with their anxiety, they need to take in knowledge. They need to take in the information, because the more they know, the more they're able to feel safe about their environment, because the world out there is not safe. The world out there it's a difficult place. There's not enough, I don't know enough to actually feel safe. And the more I can take inward, the safer that I can feel, the less anxiety I'll feel. Your 7's, on the other hand, they're external. So they are just moving out into the world constantly. They don't want to deal with the fear, and they won't even acknowledge the fear. They refuse to go to a place where they even acknowledge the fear. And so instead of that, they'll move outward into the world. They'll be looking for more fun things to do, for more things to occupy them, for more things to fill up their calendar. Bruce, would you like to tell us about the rest of your week? Or the first week of August? Penny can vouch for us. But that's what sevens will do. It's easier to have to deal with your thoughts if you're out there busy doing things, because then you don't have to deal with the difficult stuff. You can just deal with the fun stuff. You can deal with the next best thing, the more activity. So they're outward in terms of their thinking. They're outward in terms of how they deal with that fear and that anxiety, to the point where they very often won't admit their fear and the anxiety in their lives. Then you get your sixes, who sit, again, in the middle of that triad, middle of the thinking triad, but now they're confused and they're conflicted. Why? Because the sixes, they're all about danger, and they're all about trust, and they're all about being loyal. So they want to trust, but the world is not a trusting place. People out there aren't trustworthy. And worse than that, they find it difficult to trust themselves. So not only do they find themselves in a place where they're wanting to give of themselves, but now they can't trust the people out there, then they kind of go, okay, well, I'm fine on my own, I'll be absolute. And then they have this conflict because they don't really trust themselves at the same time. So you can see where the sixes also struggle. And that's why they're the only type on the Enneagram who have a phobic and a counterphobic type. You get a phobic six and a counterphobic six, because sixes tend to do that. Some of them move out in terms of their fears. Some of them go inward and won't actually deal with their fears. So they're fighting it constantly. I know I'm fearful, let me fight it. I know I'm fearful, let me just hide away. So you can see where the conflict and that feeling of, I don't know what, I'm in a confused space of thinking. So those are the centers of expression, those three triads of action, feeling, and thinking. Does anybody have any questions? If I may say, Ian, if I may talk about you. Ian, okay, so this is interesting because Ian also is a 9 on the Enneagram, and yet he scored his highest in thinking. So he's actually more of a thinker than a doer, and yet he sits in the middle of that action triad. Me, on the other hand, I scored off the charts feeling, and I scored almost 0 on action. Now that can change depending on your situation that you're in. So, for example, when I did the test, I know that I was quite stressed at work. It was at the end of last year. I already questioned my value. And I was really in a place where I was questioning my own value to the organization, and I was feeling even more stunted than I usually do from an action point of view. So and my feeling was off the charts because I was feeling so dull about myself. And so I cannot completely understand why I scored so low on action. But this is a perfect example of why, even though you sit in those centers, it can be completely confusing. You can be in a place where it's not accurate in terms of just because you sit in the action triad that you're necessarily action-oriented. So I've been coaching a 3 at the moment, and he sits in obviously the heart triad, but he is off the charts action. And the biggest coaching element of what we're dealing with at the moment is the fact that he doesn't stop to think. So as soon as something happens, I might need it again, love. As soon as something action-oriented, you see, need to fix what I see, something is wrong and I need to fix it quickly. But that's what we're dealing with in terms of our coaching situation right now, is because he's the sales lead. And all he wants to do is he wants to act on things all the time. And my advice to him, or my coaching with him at the moment, is literally to stop and listen. He talks all of the time. He doesn't hear what his team is doing or saying or feeling. And just this little bit of coaching that's happening between him and I at the moment is to stop and listen. So what did you hear your team saying, actually? Because all you wanted to do was you wanted to get involved in the action. Bruce is a perfect example of this. May I use you, love, as an example? So Bruce is incredibly action-oriented. To the point where we'll be having a date night, sitting, having the most wonderful conversation, and the next minute he'll pull out his phone because of something that I had said prompted an action. So we need to meet with the kids. Maybe we could do something on Sunday. Okay, no, definitely. I'm like still sitting, having a wonderful time, dating my husband. He's on his phone, organizing Sunday's bride with all the kids. But it could have been done tomorrow morning. Actually, right? You'd also. So yes, yeah. You can see all the action-oriented people are being your friend. Yeah. I'll get there. Good question, though. Yeah, very good question. Not funny, Carly. The next thing that I want to bring your attention to is your wings. And again, this flavors your type. So if you imagine a bowl of ice cream, and you choose your type of topping. This is often what the wings look like. And you can be stronger. So your wings are the numbers that sit directly next to you. So as a 9, I have a wing of an 8 and a wing of a 1. As a 7, you're going to have an 8 wing or a 6 wing. Now, there are a couple of different authors who write about different, they kind of feel like, some people feel like this has a huge impact on your type, others not so much. And so you are going to find different people writing about this in different areas. Some people will even say that in the first half of your life, one of your wings is very active. Second half of your life, I suppose through maturity, maybe self-awareness, the other wing takes precedence. Some people will even say that both are equal. And others will say wings hardly play any difference because you're a true type. And I think maybe it depends on the person that you are. But it definitely can flavor you. So you can imagine a 9 with more of an 8 wing is going to be, so 9s aren't assertive, 9s aren't aggressive, but with an 8 wing, to flavor them, they're going to be that much more confident. They're going to be that much more willing to assert themselves. They're going to take on those characteristics of the 8 in terms of their style, in terms of the flavor of what their 9 is. If they have more of a 1 wing, they're going to take on more of the perfectionist. They're going to actually take on seeing more detail. 9s are known to kind of sometimes be a little bit scatty in their heads and their thinking, and with the 1 type, they're going to be a little bit more certain about what they want, what they like, and so they'll also seem a little bit more kind of that need to be perfect. They may also be a little bit more in touch with their anger. In fact, both types, even with the 8, they're going to be a little bit more in touch with their anger. So it depends. It just flavors that type. And everybody has their wings. And, I mean, you can choose, as we go through this, or as you kind of get into the Enneagram, you can choose how much emphasis you place on that. But you'll often see, like if you read different blogs or Enneagram posts, you'll often say, you'll see, I'm a 9 with 1. So 9W1. That's what they're talking about. They're talking about your wing. Or I'm a 7 with 2. 7 with 6. Not going to happen with a 2. Yeah. So that's where your wings come in. And again, it just flavors your type. Okay, so wings are simple. Oh, who saw the JP? That was my question. Where's JP? What's wrong with that slide? Nice, love. It's not centered. Yeah. The ones. My husband goes to 1 under stress. Okay. So Dave, here's to answer your questions now. Your lines. Again, you're going to hear different people speaking about they'll use different words for this. Some authors will say it's your lines of integration or disintegration. Others will say it's your lines of stress or lines of growth. Other people will call it your stretch and your release lines. So starting with your stretch lines, this is where you would be seen to go under stress. And this is also sometimes why, Lee, to answer your questions, why sometimes it's a little bit more difficult with these online tests to get an accurate result. When I was working with Youth for Christ, and we actually brought this test we used to run a volunteer program. We got a whole bunch of volunteers from overseas that came to work in all of our community projects. And 9 times out of 10, because these volunteers were outside of their comfort zone, they were outside of a country that they knew, they were far away from home, even though they were having a ball, they often would score according to their stress, because they would answer questions in that space of stress. So that's also why sometimes these tests can be a little bit difficult to kind of nail you, because it depends on what you're feeling even in that moment or in that day. Whereas the test, the paid test, is an adaptive test where you actually, no one person is going to do the same test. It literally is going to answer your questions as you go, and then they'll put in more questions as you answer them. They'll put in more questions, and they'll actually guide you in terms of finding out what your type is. No people will do the same test because of that, because of the situation that you're in, and that's why it's that much more accurate. And they'll also take stress levels into consideration. So again, if I can refer you to that, it actually gives you a stress and strain profile, which is at the bottom over here. And it will actually show you psychological strain, vocational strain, interpersonal strain. And that's what this test will do. It will actually give you a level of where you're at from a strain point of view. So this is where your lines come in. The 1 will move to a 4 under stress. So your stretch lines are your stress lines. Okay? Your 4 moves to a 2 under stress. Your 2 will move to an 8 under stress. Your 8 will move to a 5. Your 5 to a 7. Your 7 to a 1. Your 9 moves to a 6 under stress. Your 6 moves to a 3. And your 3 moves to a 9 under stress. Okay, so those are your stretch lines. Stretch or stress lines. And you will actually, once you get to know your personality, you will actually see yourself going into that space of stress. Often, if I'm struggling to type somebody, I'll actually say, what do you do under stress? Because that's often what we're able to verbalize. We're able to verbalize those stress points, those feelings of agitation, or we're able to kind of see that quicker than what we're able to see our growth. The growth is a little bit blurry sometimes. We're not sure where that takes us. But the stress is quite an easy thing to see. So for example, again, Bruce, being this fun-loving, always laughing, so happy, brings this energy into the house. I know immediately when Bruce is stressed because he suddenly he goes to his 1. So the 7 goes to the 1 under stress. Suddenly he becomes a little more judgmental. He becomes a little bit more nitpicky. He becomes a little bit intolerant. And he becomes a little bit critical because things aren't perfect for him and he's feeling the stress of that. And so you can almost see and feel a different person coming into the house. For myself, a 9, I go to a 6 under stress. So the 9 who's kind of happy to go along, to just be in the space of everything's going to be okay, becomes more anxious because I go to the 6. So I'm sitting with this anxiety. I start questioning myself. I start questioning the people. I feel like I need advice from everybody around me, because I'm feeling unsure of what I need to do in a particular situation, and I'm stressed in that situation. So I take on those 6 characteristics. And we can go through the entire Enneagram just looking at the stress points, and I'm hoping to do that next week. So Dave, to be honest with you, that is actually, you've just said what the Enneagram is all about. Because what we need to be able to do, and a highly integrated person, a very healthy person, is able to do exactly that. But if you think about it, it's really hard to act in a different way when you're triggered. Because when you're angry, when you're stressed, somebody's pushed all of your buttons. To take a step back and actually go, I'm going to act differently right now, is hugely difficult. But that is exactly what the Enneagram teaches you. It teaches you, because of the circle, because of how we are all connected. And next week we'll talk about how to actually get in touch specifically with your growth point. So for example, moving on to the growth side over here, you'll see that the arrows just basically go the other way around, okay? So for a 1 needs to actually take on 7 characteristics under growth. And why is that? Because the 1 is usually incredibly, this is how it needs to be, these are my lists, this is how life needs to be completely perfect. And the 7 is the fun one on the Enneagram. So the 1 almost needs to go, hold on a minute, let me have a look at what I've already got that is perfect, instead of trying to look at what I need to make perfect. Let me look at what is fun and big and glorious about my life right now, instead of looking at what I need to do and getting angry with the fact that things aren't perfect and I need to make things better all the time. So you can suddenly see why taking on 7 characteristics of joy and fun and being out there with great, wonderful ideas is so important for a 1, because 1s don't allow themselves to go there often. Ones don't often allow themselves to be in a place where it's just, let me allow myself fun here instead of this perfect to-do list, or my perfect home, or my perfect relationships. And suddenly they stop and they go, oh my goodness, there's more to life than just the perfection of this world and the anger that I feel because things aren't perfect. Let me go and have some fun out there with my 7 friends. And you can suddenly see where those beautiful characteristics of the 7 comes into play. So what Bruce is saying is absolutely correct. The only thing that I would question is that he said that you go to a certain place naturally under growth. It's not as natural as the strength path. The strength path. It actually takes a lot more thought. So I remember when Bruce first had when Aria, the youngest of all the grandchildren, were born, she was just this little cherub, and he would literally just zone in on this child. I've never seen Bruce do that. Like, I don't get that kind of attention, ever. I'm present to you right now. And yet with this little baby, he could spend almost an hour literally just playing with her, gurgling at her, loving her, adoring this child. And I started calling it his Aria presence. Because I even get goosies when I tell the story, because you don't often see the 7 who's so scattered in his thinking, so scattered in what he does, so not present a lot of the time. And yet, so that was a natural growth for him. That was a happy place for him. But sometimes growth is not just a happy place. Sometimes growth takes a heck of a lot of hard work. So for example, for me to grow, I'm supposed to go to a 3. That is not comfortable for me. 3s are standing up here. 3s are the ones that are making the noise and wanting to be seen and having an image of success. This is growth for me, and I'm not loving it. It's really hard. But it takes thought, it takes commitment, it takes understanding that this is an important thing for growth. So for Bruce to be present all of the time as a 7, that's not a happy place for him. That takes hard work. That takes growth. That takes him actually taking a step back and going, instead of booking another skydiving day, I might actually stay home and do something differently. It's such a cool opportunity to kind of tell your husband what you feel. Oh my goodness, we're going to play it again and again. But that's why, Dave. So it's not necessarily, it doesn't come naturally. The stress seems to happen more naturally because that just happens. That is your trigger. That is where you move to that place. The growth takes time. That growth actually takes you standing back and going, Leish, put yourself out there, assert yourself. You can do this. You can be successful. You can have these goals. You can put yourself in this place of actually having that kind of an image. And again, we can go around every single one of the types because of that growth point. Are you happy with that answer? Make a bit more sense. And also what you were saying in terms of choosing to scoop from other types. There's an amazing another tool, but an amazing exercise that we've called the scissors dilemma. And what you do is, if you're in a dilemma situation in your life, and say you're sitting in a place of, let's just use a 9 again. If you're sitting in that place, you kind of go, okay, this is my dilemma. You speak into the dilemma. Then what you do is you move to that place of the 8. So now I'm still a 9, it doesn't change my type, but now I'm accessing my 8 wing. And I'm going, okay, imagine I was an 8. How would this 8 speak into my dilemma? And you suddenly get a different answer. You suddenly go, flip, I'm not just stuck in this place of 9-ness, having to deal with this dilemma, because I can access some of my 8 to speak into this. Then you move into your 1, your other wing, and you go, hold on a minute, this even gives me another perspective. This is amazing, because now the 1 has a different way of looking at my dilemma, because now remember, they're bringing in the perfection, they're bringing in different ways of doing things, to-do lists and detail. So now already you've accessed your wings in this dilemma. Now you move to your lines, and the 9 will move to a 3 and suddenly go, okay, hang on. This 9 who doesn't want to act, who wants to avoid all the conflict in the world, a 3's got something. You scoop from that 3. You find out, what is the 3 telling me to do in this dilemma? What is the 3? How is the 3 telling me to assert myself? and be successful. And you get information like that. And then you move into your 6. And just because that's your stress point doesn't mean that the 6 can't speak into your world and can't speak into that, because you know the 6. As a 9, you know the 6 because you go there. So you can actually scoop from that number and you can speak into that dilemma. And suddenly you've got a perspective which is straight into Dave's point. Why can't I just decide that I want to act differently in this situation? Once you really become integrated and once you actually understand your type and you're able to go, flip, I'm stressed now, how am I going to act in this situation? And you actually give yourself the time to do that, you can suddenly have 4 different opinions. And you have access to all of them. Hey? Well, I mean, you can do it practically, even. You can go and stand in your lounge and do this. Okay, this is what this would say. This is what, and like you literally can move into those different types. And suddenly you get to know not just yourself, but you get to know how other types might respond in a situation. And you go, my goodness, this suddenly has so much more value. Anything else? Any more questions on that? Is that okay for you, Dave? Yeah.
When you go to growth and you go to your release point, you're going to the positive side of it.
You'll actually take on, yes, you will. You're not going to take on their bad qualities. You're going to take on kind of like the growth qualities of that type. Yeah, so the same with the stress. You'll take on negative qualities. But you'll see a little bit later on where 7s and 9s can be quite similar. And I'll point it out just now when I get to that point. Amazing, eh? There's one thing we have in common, my husband and I. It's so cool. Okay, so as you can see, we're just layering. So this is what I've been talking about in terms of the levels of integration. And again, depending on what you read and which websites you go to, the Enneagram Institute actually says that there's 9 levels of health. So they will say that there are 3 levels of low health or integration, 3 levels of moderate, and 3 levels of high. And basically, it just depends on where we're at in our lives. So it depends on the self-awareness. It depends on how much work you've been willing to do, how much work you've been willing to do on yourself in terms of, this is my floating self, this is my anchored self. It's an understanding that we have of ourselves and the people around us. And ultimately, it's an understanding of God as well. Because I think often we relate to God according to our type. So I'll never forget, and it was actually quite recent. Bruce and I were already married, and we were still living at our previous home. And I remember sitting with God and the realization of the fact that I was valuable to Him, that He actually valued me. It was the weirdest thing. I mean, this is recent. This is like 2 years ago, where I sat there and I went. Because I would always spend time with God kind of almost feeling like I was standing in line waiting for my turn. You know, like waiting for Him to say, okay, Leisha, I'm ready for you now. Like I'd be sitting, having that attitude when it came to spending time with God. Because He was so busy with other people. You know, like, so wait your turn, Leish. I'll be with you just now. Not really knowing, is this my turn, isn't my turn? And I remember sitting there and sobbing, thinking, my gosh, I've been relating to God. I have been having a relationship with God based on the fact that I think I'm not valuable. Based on the fact that I feel like I have nothing to give. Based on the fact that I am not, like I'll just go along to get along. I won't assert myself. I won't actually put myself into God's presence because He's too big for me. I'm too little for Him. And it was an amazing experience. And then it got me thinking. I thought, how many of us, because we have a need to be perfect, won't go to God or relate to God in a way of being imperfect? When God just wants to, God already sees you as perfect. And yet we feel like we can't have a conversation, we can't be a certain way because we're not perfect enough, or we're not unique enough, or we're not successful enough, we don't have the right image. Amazing. So it's got to do, your levels of integration have got to do with where you're at, what you've been willing to go to, how far you've been willing. You remember the iceberg? How far you've been willing to kind of go down and question your behaviors, question your motivations, question why it is that you act in a certain way under stress or health or whatever it might be. Do I need to read those? Everybody happy? This is my most fun thing that I found of late that I'm using a lot, especially from a work context. So we all have our types, but within our types, we have, this is just another layer, we have 3 subtypes that we could be. The one subtype is a self-preservation subtype, and we're going to go through the detail of all of those. The second subtype is a sexual or one-on-one, so somebody who likes one-on-one contact. And the third one is a social subtype. So again, you can see how this flavors your type and how different we can look. Because as a 9 with a sexual or one-on-one subtype, I might look very different to a 9 who has a more of a social subtype. And I'm going to go through those in detail now. And then what we're going to do is I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions for you to also try and work out just for yourself, just in this setting right now, what you think you might be. Because this in itself, just this, like if you don't even know your type right now, this is such a fun thing to play with. When I remember when I did the workshop, they actually put us into our subtypes, not our types, our subtypes. So we were sitting in a group of, so I'm a sexual or one-on-one subtype. They put us into a sexual subtype, a self-preservation subtype, and a social subtype. And it was the most amazing experience. Everybody was sitting there. The self-preservation subtype, they were all sitting there. Now you can imagine, they're protection, right? I need to be ready for anything. And they were sitting there, notes, perfect circle, notes, pen and paper, ready. They didn't give us instruction. They just put us into our groups. And that's what the self-preservation subtypes were doing. They were sitting there just ready. Not much talking, kind of looking, what's expected of us? What are we going to do next? Just the sexual or one-on-one subtypes, they were in this perfect little huddle. Eye contact, how are you all feeling? How's this all happening for you? Is everybody, like, it didn't matter that we didn't have instruction, but it was about connecting. Let's connect on this deeper level. The social subtype group, they were having the party. They were sitting in the corner of the room. I kind of looked over, I thought, flip, I wish I was part of that group because it kind of looked really fun. They literally were, one guy was sitting on the table, the other people they literally were having a party. They were just having the best time. And in that moment, I felt more connected with my subtype, understanding that we were in this place of one-on-one or social or self-preservation than I did with the other 9s in the group. And there were 2 or 3 other 9s in that group. And I felt like I had very little in common with them because we were all in different groups. We were different subtypes. So even if you don't know your type, to find out, to try and get to a place where you just understand this. And even this will give you some kind of an understanding of how you relate to people around you. So again, Bruce and I are different subtypes. I'm sexual. I'm pretty sure that he's self-preservation. So self-preservation is about physical safety. It's about well-being. Remember, this is about I. So I look at me first. I need to make sure that I'm safe so that I can make sure everybody else is safe. Well-being, material security, comfort. They push for independence. You may not want to feel dependent on others to have your needs met. It also adds an element concerned with security and conservation of energy to your relationship with your environment and others. So if I had to say right now, like there's an emergency, guys, there's a bomb that's about to explode, we need to run out here. You'll see your self-preservation people collecting everything they need for every eventuality. So if they're needing to take a chair with them, they will take that. If they're needing to take their bag, they will make sure that that's with them. They will make sure that they are in a place of self-preservation. The other day, Carly's phone broke, and so we were trying to look for a pin or something to... Bruce Pipes said, no, I've got one of those. And in his small little section of his wallet, he kind of lets... In there was not only the pin that we needed to get the battery out of the phone, but I think an elastic band, a memory stick, everything but coins. But he had everything that he'd need to either fix a parachute or fix a cell phone or just in case. And his bigger bag is like that as well. If you had to look in there, you'd find things that... And do not touch that stuff. Because if you touch that stuff, he'll never know where. I mean, he knows exactly what is in there. It may look like a complete mess to me, but he knows exactly what's in there, just in case of any eventuality. And that's what your self-preservation type will look like. So now you have your self-preservation type and you have a sexual subtype or a one-on-one subtype. And your one-on-one is about us. It's about me and you. It's about intimacy. The intensity of experiences, the intimacy of relationships, actively seeking out experiences and relationships that promise very strong concentrations of energy that creates a feeling of contentment and completion. This external activity or person. So it's about connections like this. Raphael, I have to apologize to you, but I'm the worst person to host with. Because for me, a Sunday is all about the connections. So poor Raphael and I, we're on hosting duty on Sunday, and I walk out and I say to Penny, I'm so bad at this. She says, I know you talk too much. I said, and that was exactly the case. And I walked out, I said, I'm going to have to apologize to Raphael. Because, I mean, at the end of it all, I took whatever I could, cups to the kitchen, and then I stop and I talk. And then it's another cup to the kitchen, and I stop and I talk. And poor Raphael is like sweating because she's done so much. She's sweeping at the end of the day, and I just go, she must think I'm like the most hopeless person. Yeah. But for me, the connection is around that. Like I leave church, and my church experience is based on that intimacy, that connection with the people that I've had. And it's not this big social thing. It's literally one-on-one. It's that connection that I have. So again, we have a self-preservation and a sexual. You can understand how even that can become something that is a hot topic in a married relationship. Because for me, I only feel connected to Bruce when we've had these intimate moments. For him, he's just like it's not about that for him at all. I've got a friend, she's actually Bruce's cousin who introduced us. She was too funny. She's also a 7 on the Enneagram, but I think she's a social subtype. And she came to me the other day, or we were chatting on the phone, and she said, Leish, I never feel more connected with my husband than when I'm at a party. I promise you. I'm not even joking, Sherry. That is what she said to me. She said, I never feel more connected with I leave a party and I'm so in love with him. I'm just, like it was the best night of my life. She won't even have had a conversation with him, but she walks away thinking this was it. And he is, I think he's also self-preservation, and he's just worried about her the whole time. So he's kind of checking on her, making sure she's having the time of her life, walks out of there, thinks, I'm so in love with my husband, he's the best oak in the whole world. Because she's a social, which moves me on to the social. So social is about it's about the bigger group. It's about interactions and relationships with other people, lots of people. Collective group activities, awareness of group norms and standards, aware of status and level of approval in groups, push towards community and shared purposes. So again, you can see where these subtypes will flavor your type. I've got 3 7s in my life. Carly, Bruce, and my ex-husband was also a 7. I know, you wonder, hey. It does make you think. Leish, try and do it better this time. But I think all 3 of them are different subtypes. And it just flavors them so differently. It's amazing to watch them in different situations and just how that. So question those things. I have just a few questions that I'll ask you. So self-preservation, and maybe just answer these in your head, and maybe it will give you a little bit of an indication of what you might be. Self-preservation. How important is your home? How much time and money do you spend on your home? Can you easily move to a new living space? How important is your family? Do you experience warm relationships with family members? What is your current relationship to food? Buying, preparing, eating. Do you like to share your meals with other people? How much time and energy do you spend on your physical health? Are you up to date in your healthcare appointments and doctors, dentists, etc.? Self-preservation. Do you feel financially secure? How much effort How much effort do you make towards earning money and managing money? Do you worry about this? What is enough? So those are questions that you would answer yes or no to kind of get a feeling for if you're a self-preservation type. That's often where their thinking will go. 1-to-1 or sexual. How important is it for you to have an intimate relationship? If you are married, how much attention do you bring to your partner? Do you prefer to spend time with your partner or close friends one-on-one? Or would you rather spend time with people or in a group? What role does sexuality play in your life? So again, it's about intimacy. Do you have a spiritual practice or place where you go to, where you kind of become personal in your space, where it becomes that intimate space for you? Then social. Are you a member of any organized groups? What role or position do you usually play in groups? Do you experience a sense of belonging to a community? Do you have a sense of social duty or sacrifice for the greater good? Do you gravitate toward being of influence in a social relationships and structured community? Are you engaged with social issues? Do you follow the news? Do you participate in government or political groups? So again, if we go back to what the Enneagram is all about, it's about bringing balance. So it doesn't mean that just because I'm a sexual subtype, I can't access the other subtypes. In fact, my job is to try and do that. So I need to be in a place where my intimacy or my one-on-one connection with Bruce is not the only thing that I'm valuing in terms of our relationship. I actually need to get to a place where, in fact, I need to get to a place where I'm happy to share him with other people and not just need him on my own or for myself. That's growth. And it's the same when it comes to self-preservation. I need to spend time thinking about what is it that I need. What do I need to do to grow? What do I need for me? Not just for everybody else, but for me. How do I become a little bit more selfish in that space? So even in terms of your subtypes, that's what we need to do. We need to be able to get into that place of balance, accessing all of those other subtypes. Last 2 layers, and then we'll call it an evening, because I know it's a lot to take in. But there is a woman called Karen Horney, a little bit of a unfortunate name. She's sexual subtype. And she realized that there are 3 ways in which people try to solve their inner conflicts. Also described how people try to meet their needs. Now you can see again where it is that we can relate to other types on the Enneagram. Because these types suddenly almost have no relation to one another, but because of how they deal in conflict or how they deal with themselves when their needs aren't being met, they suddenly can see where they are similar to other types that they don't necessarily even have a line to. They don't necessarily go to in stress or in growth. But they have a similar way of dealing with these issues. So how is it that people try to meet their needs? Okay, this is what the Horneyan, by Karen Horney, the Horneyan groups, these are their groups. So the assertive types, and this makes complete sense. You've got your 3, your 7, and your 8. Your 3 is your need to succeed, your 7 need to avoid pain, and your 8 is the power. They're wanting power. And the way that they will get or try to meet their needs will be to assert themselves. So the same guy that I was telling you about from work, who's the sales lead, he did the test and he scored highest on all 3 of these. So you look at the assertive type in this man. He was highest on 3, and then he scored 2nd highest on 8 and 3rd highest on 7. So in terms of being assertive, you've got like a powerhouse right there. But it also makes it very difficult for him to grow and be anything other than just assertive. So your assertive types, they are independent, they're extroverted, and they're energetic. They take charge and want to make things happen. They have a sense of importance. When they are stressed, they will reinforce their self-importance and push back against obstacles. Okay, can be out of touch with their own heart. The heart creates an emotional connection with ourselves and with others. And it helps us love and appreciate the value of ourselves and others. But often these assertive types are out of touch with that heart space, especially when they're stressed and they're not getting what they want. To compensate for this imbalance, these people seek adventure and stimulation. So it's often the adventure seekers, the risk takers. And And again, if you're struggling to work out who you are, what type you are in the Enneagram, and you haven't done any tests, this already is an indication, because you may know that you definitely are more an assertive type, which already kind of brings it down to a 3, 7, or an 8 in terms of asserting yourself to get what you need. Your compliant types are your 1, 2s, and your 6s. These are responsible people, dedicated, and they want to do what people expect of them. They will do what's best, even if it means sacrificing their own needs and their own wants. This is your 1, 2, and your 6. Yeah, the green ones. They have a hard time relaxing or playing because there is always work to do. And they can have sense of being a little superior, but this can be very subtle. Under stress, they seek advice from their conscience to determine the right thing to do. So remember, they want to comply. They want to comply because it's the right thing to do. And these people will seek belief systems or rules to help them deal with ambiguity and uncertainty. They will consult their rules and beliefs to define their position on issues. So it's all about going back. Geordie's smiling. Is that right, George? Geordie's a 6. So it's about those rules, because the rules bring safety, remember? It helps them to feel safe, knowing what to do and how to do it. Then you get your withdrawn types, which is your 4, 5, and 9. And your withdrawn types are quiet and introverted and mostly introspective. They enjoy spending lots of time by themselves and feel uncomfortable in large groups. They don't overtly seek attention and don't wish to assert themselves much. They feel uncomfortable taking charge or in competition, or when they're in competition, and under stress they withdraw from the world and into the inner space and imagination. They have a hard time feeling their vitality and substance. And these people move away or withdraw from others to get their needs met. So again, you can see how we connect it to other types simply by this behavior or these behavior challenges that we face, because we act differently in those situations. Lastly, your harmonics describe how each style handles conflict. So now this is once you don't get your way. What are these types going to do? And you'll see this is the only place where Bruce and I actually have something in common. We have positive outlook, love. It's a good thing. So you have your reactive types, which is your 4, 6, and 8. And don't panic about this, guys. This is kind of like literally the last layer of what you need to know. And it's not, that's why I have my notes out now, because I don't remember the stuff as easily. It's not as obvious in terms of what people do. The more you kind of spend time with it, the more you realize that it possibly is quite obvious, but don't stress about it. I'm just giving you all of the layers. So your reactive types are your 4, 6, and 8. Emotionally reactive under stress. They tend to work themselves up when a problem happens and have a hard time containing their feelings. Venting their frustration allows them to move on to dealing with the issue. It's important for them to vent. They also want others to react emotionally. Such an emotion would confirm that others agree that it is a big deal. So now you can imagine a reactive type. So a type 8 possibly that you're friends with, who is reacting to a situation completely emotionally, and you're a type where you're first of all going to withdraw, and secondly you're going to have a positive approach to this situation. And even in that situation, say it's a husband and wife again, how are you going to rub each other up the wrong way? Because the one is wanting a reaction, something that is emotional, and the other one's just going, no man, everything's going to work out, we're going to be absolutely fine, positive outlook, everything's going to be good. And you can just in this again see where issues can arise. The reactive types, where their desire for a strong emotional response from others may be a test of trust in that person. Then you have your positive outlook approach types, and they're your 7, 9s, and 2s. They're generally optimistic and tend to avoid the problem. So now you can actually see where we could get into trouble, because both of us know that there's an elephant in the room. But no, positive outlook, nothing's wrong with us. We're in a really good space. And they distract themselves with something else or minimize the problem or go skydiving. It's a key solution and it works. These types want to feel good and want others around them to feel good. They would rather have, remember the 7 is because life is about good, and the 9 is because they don't like the conflict. So let's just make everything fine. Doesn't matter. Like just a positive outlook. These types, they would rather have everybody happy than have to deal with problems or negativity. Unfortunately, this approach can lead them to deny the existence of their problems and therefore delay addressing them. Elephant in the room. Lastly, your competency approach types is your 1, 3, and your 5. They try to solve problems in an objective, in unemotional manner, so they remove themselves and become unemotional. Unlike people of the reactive approach, they don't get worked up when problems happen. They remain cool and emotionally attached from them. Detached from them. And those are your manic styles, your conflict styles. So that's pretty much all of the information that I've got for tonight, and I know it's a lot to take in, and it literally is layering, layering, layering from the symbol all the way to all of these different triads and the instinctual and the wings. But I suppose the bottom line for me is the fact that, do you remember in the beginning I said that you're already in a box, but the Enneagram shines a light onto that box and actually helps you to climb out of that box. You can understand why, with all of these layers flavoring your type, why you actually don't look alike just because you're all 7s or because you're all 8s or because you've got so many friends that are 3s. There's going to be a different flavor. You are going to look different. Your subtypes are important in that as well.